Lisa và hệ thống truyền hình Việt TV Direct TV Network xin kính chào quý vị khán thính giả. Kính thưa quý vị, hiện tại chúng tôi đang có mặt tại Blanco, trung tâm thành phố San Jose để gửi đến quý vị sự kiện tác giả đặc biệt Signature Author Event của 2025. Nhân vật chính của năm nay là nhà báo Vicky Nguyễn. Và ngay bây giờ xin mời quý vị cùng chúng tôi theo dõi một số hình ảnh qua ống kính của đội ngũ của Việt TV Network của chúng tôi thực hiện. Kính thưa quý vị, chiều ngày 15 tháng 11 năm 2025 tại Blanco, trung tâm thành phố San Jose, Quỹ Thư viện Công cộng San Jose Public Library Foundation đã tổ chức sự kiện tác giả đặc biệt Signature Author Event của 2025 với sự tham gia đông đảo quan khách, mạnh thường quân và người yêu sách trong cộng đồng. Nhân vật chính của buổi gặp gỡ năm nay là Vicky Nguyễn, người dẫn chương trình của đài NBC News và cũng là tác giả quyển hồi ký Boat Baby, kể lại hành trình vượt biên đầy cảm xúc của gia đình cô từ Việt Nam đến Hoa Kỳ và chặng đường phấn đấu trở thành nhà báo được yêu mến. Tại sự kiện, Vicky Nguyễn đã chia sẻ nhiều câu chuyện chân thật và đầy cảm hứng về tuổi thơ, về nghị lực của người tị nạn Việt Nam, cũng như ý nghĩa của việc giữ gìn tiếng nói và bản sắc trong hành trình hội nhập. Khán giả cũng có cơ hội giao lưu, đặt câu hỏi và nhận sách có chữ ký tác giả trong không khí ấm áp và đầy thân tình. Đặc biệt, toàn bộ lợi nhuận thu được từ sự kiện sẽ được dùng để hỗ trợ các chương trình học tập, đọc sách và phát triển cộng đồng của Thư viện Công cộng San Jose, góp phần mang trí thức đến với mọi người. Hi Vicky, it's my honor to be in here to see the shows. So what inspired you to write a memoir of the Boat Baby?
Oh, come on, Lisa. Thank you for being here. I wanted to tell my family's story. Like many Vietnamese Americans, we came here by boat. We escaped the country after the fall of Saigon in 1979. I was 8 months old, and I realized that it is a very important story to tell, especially in this day and age, so people can appreciate why immigrants come to this country, what the American dream means, and how it is still very much alive.
So when telling a story about your family escaping from Vietnam, is there a particular memory that moved you the most?
Well, I was only 8 months old when my parents made that journey, and so in talking with my mom and dad and remembering through their experiences what they went through, they were attacked at sea by Thai pirates, but they were very lucky. They only were robbed. They made it to Malaysia, Pulau Bidong, a refugee camp, after 2 days and 2 nights crossing the South China Sea. And we were on that refugee camp for 10 months before we were sponsored to Eugene, Oregon. And what I admire and respect so much about my parents is their courage and their bravery and their sense of humor and how they always manage to find a silver lining. They're always looking for what's positive. They always look for what they can do. They don't focus on what they can't do. And they always ask, why not? Why not us? And because of their hard work and their courage and their bravery, I have been able to go from being a Boat Baby refugee to a national network correspondent at NBC News, and I am always grateful to my parents for everything they sacrificed for me.
Okay, so what message do you hope the reader will take out from Boat Baby?
I hope that the readers laugh. I hope they cry. I hope they think about their own family journey and everything that they have gone through. We are all from somewhere else in this beautiful United States of America, and it is our diversity in this country that makes us great. It is all the different cultures and languages and foods and ideologies that we can learn from each other. And so I hope readers enjoy the book, and I hope it inspires them, and I hope that they go and talk to their own parents and grandparents about their journeys and their memories, because it's all part of our heritage.
That's right. I am also one of the boat child.
Yes. And so, I mean, we share so much in common, but you don't have to be a Vietnamese refugee to appreciate what is in Boat Baby. I think it reminds us of what is so incredible about America and what is so incredible about hard work. And when you believe in yourself and you just try to focus on doing the best you can every single day, you will get where you need to go.
Trước tiên là Betty xin chào chị Lisa, xin chào quý khán thính giả của đài Việt TV. Rất là cảm ơn Việt TV hôm nay tới để chia sẻ những cái dịp ngày hôm nay. Thì ngày hôm nay đó là cái bữa ra mắt sách và trò chuyện, nói chuyện với Vicky Nguyễn, là con gái gia đình tị nạn. Không những vậy, cổ là người tị nạn, cổ là qua đây đi tị nạn qua đây tới Mỹ, và hôm nay là cổ ra mắt cái sách mà kể câu chuyện của cổ từ nhỏ lớn lên là người tị nạn, con gái gia đình tị nạn, cái cảm giác và cảm tưởng của một người đứa bé vừa Việt và vừa Mỹ như thế nào, mà hôm nay con đường của cổ đi tới ngày thành công hôm nay. Và những cái dịp hôm nay rất là quan trọng là tại vì đây là những câu chuyện của lịch sử của người Việt Nam tị nạn của mình, và từ xưa đến nay đó có thể là không có nhiều nơi, không có đầy đủ chỗ, không có đầy đủ cơ hội để chia sẻ những câu chuyện này. Và sau khi 50 năm có tại đất Mỹ này cộng đồng người Việt Nam và cộng đồng tị nạn, đây những câu chuyện này rất là quý báu để hướng dẫn cho thế hệ sau này, để cho có cơ hội để biết là về nguồn là có nghĩa là cái gì, và cái sự hy sinh của gia đình, cái sự hy sinh của thế hệ đi trước. Thường xuyên là bố mẹ, cô chú, ông bác không có kể nhiều câu chuyện này, và nếu không có những câu chuyện này mình sẽ không thực sự, Betty tin rằng là một đứa thế hệ thứ nhì đó, Betty lo là sẽ không có một cái nguồn gốc để trở về. Cho nên đây là cơ hội để tiếp tục kể những câu chuyện đó từ cái nội dung của một người rất là thành công tại Mỹ đây, nhưng mà cô ấy viết câu chuyện này lúc Betty đọc thấy là rất là xúc động, tại vì tuy là cổ cái sự thành công của cổ là của cổ, và cổ là thành công trong cái truyền thống của người Mỹ tiếng Anh, nhưng cổ trong câu chuyện của cổ đó là nhờ vì cái nguồn gốc tị nạn, vì cộng đồng người Việt Nam đã ủng hộ cổ, vì gia đình cổ, với cái tư cách đó là những cái sự hy sinh đó, mỗi ngày đó là cái điều cổ nắm vững mà cho cổ sức mạnh để làm công việc mà có thể rất là khó cho những người Việt Nam có thể được bước vào.
Dạ, thưa cô có muốn gửi lời gì đến các thế hệ trẻ ngày hôm nay không ạ?
Dạ, để Betty xin phép là gửi lời thế hệ trẻ và gửi lời cho thế hệ trước nữa, cho các bạn thế hệ trẻ. Mình biết là mình là người Việt Nam, nhưng mà ý nghĩa cái sự sâu sắc của cái ý nghĩa đó càng ngày mình có cơ hội để học hỏi thêm. Cho nên Betty khuyên các bạn trẻ đó là hỏi những câu chuyện này, hỏi về cái lịch sử của mình, hỏi về có thể là không có dễ nói chuyện, tại đây là một cái lịch sử rất là đau khổ, nhưng mà Betty biết lúc là thế hệ trước sẽ rất là rộng lượng để chia sẻ những gì họ đã trải qua, và cho thế hệ trước Betty xin gửi lời cảm ơn là không có thế hệ trước, không có sự hy sinh của thế hệ trước, là thế hệ thứ nhì là thật sự không có cơ hội để bước để vươn lên, và cho nên là Betty không bao quên cái điều đó.
Welcome everyone, my name is Betty Young. I am your county supervisor representing the downtown and east side district, and I get to welcome home a daughter of San Jose, an east side original right here.
That's right.
Welcome home, Vicky. And also a fixture in my family's living room for years.
Yes. 12 years at KNTV, NBC Bay Area. Some of my colleagues are here from the station today. Michael, Candace, DNA. So if you see some local celebrities, they're here.
Yes. So thank you for joining us today, Vicky. You're on this whirlwind book tour. You're on TV every single day, and thank you for carving out the time to come home to San Jose.
It's my pleasure. And this is a beautiful crowd. You all look amazing. You could be anywhere. I'm so honored and thrilled that you're sharing this moment with me. I will never forget it.
And we're all book lovers. We're all library lovers and book supporters. All right. So I'm going to get straight into this, and I'm so excited. As a daughter of Vietnamese refugees myself, this has been an incredible read to see my family's journey and also my own journey reflected in the pages. So thank you for telling our stories and building this bridge. And so we're going to get right into this, okay? What inspired you to tell your family story?
So I have always been a lover of books. When I came to this country, I was 2 years old. Our family was sponsored here by 2 churches and the Ware family and colleagues of my mom at the Holt Children's International Adoption Agency. And growing up in 2 cultures, books were the easiest way for me to sort of understand how to be an American kid. And I loved the library because you could go and get as many books as you wanted for free and keep them for weeks, and they would transport you all over the place. So growing up, I had a reverence for authors. I knew what Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume and Roald Dahl and whoever wrote the Sweet Valley High Twins books, you know, what they all did for me. So when the opportunity came up that I could put my family's story into a memoir, it made a lot of sense. Because at first, the idea of like me just writing about my career or myself, that wasn't that enticing. I'd only been at NBC News, the network, for a couple of years. But when we started talking about the fact that I went from being a boat baby refugee to a national network correspondent and anchor in one generation, it really made me pause and think, that is absolutely incredible. I know my story is not the only one like that in this room, in this country. And so I wanted to do justice to my family. I wanted to give a voice to the millions of other immigrant families who have been through very similar struggles. And this is just I think it's a gift, it's a love letter to this country. And I'm just so grateful that readers have responded to it the way that they have, because you don't have to be a refugee or an immigrant to appreciate the values of hard work, of courage, of taking chances, of trying to live in service, and to make your corner of the earth better every single day with small actions, with the things that you do, the smile that you give the neighbor, you know, the conversation you strike up with someone when you're waiting in line. We all have a lot of agency in this country, and I think and I hope that is what Boat Baby ultimately reminds people. I want people to laugh, I want people to cry, I want them to, you know, learn something about journalism and the experience of boat people coming from Vietnam. But ultimately, I want people to walk away from that book thinking about themselves and their own lives and what they're doing to live a life that is purposeful. Because I think when you live a life of purpose, as you in public service know, you can never be sad or anxious or depressed. You recognize that your life has so much value. And so that's what I ultimately hope that readers get from Boat Baby.
Oh, thank you, Vicki. That was beautiful. I didn't hold up. Go ahead. So this is a perfect segue to this next point, the question. It's you talked about the laughing, the crying, the deep, potentially, well, actually painful memories, right, of your family's journey. You go from migration and refugee and surviving and resettlement to some very lighthearted moments. There was one particular story that I was like, oh no, like that was a PTSD moment for me, right? Getting caught with your boyfriend at the park by your immigrant parents. And that, for those of you who may not have experienced this, I'm sure you have. It's like death. But how did you approach writing this? Because it runs the full gamut of emotions,
yeah.
And I imagine you had to tap in to some very deeply rooted memories and experiences.
Well, thankfully, I do get to write for a living as a journalist. So actually, the writing wasn't the hardest part because, you know, when I could get into the zone and just bang out the chapters, I was in like a flow. But it was the organization of how was I going to tell this story. And it's mostly linear. I mean, it really does start with like who my parents were before they became mom and dad to me. What were they like as kids growing up in Vietnam? In a lot of poverty, in a lot of just kind of what you would imagine at that time where women didn't have a lot of access to education. My dad, when he was 18, was drafted right into the South Vietnamese Army. Fortunately for him, he took a test and answered enough questions correctly to qualify to be a medic, and that allowed him to postpone joining the front lines right away, where many of his friends did go and did die on the battlefield almost within weeks or months of enlisting. And for my mom, growing up in like a small fishing village south of Saigon, she at 18 decided she was gonna go to the big city. And at that time, like she was gonna practice her English, work for American companies. The war is raging, but there was also like a lot of life still happening for everyday people in Vietnam. They still have to go on, you know, and I think a lot about that because there are many conflicts that are happening still all across the world right now, where people want all the same things. They just want to be able to survive, they want to provide for their children, and they want to make the best life for themselves that they can, given the circumstances that they were born in. So that part of it was the toughest. And I got to work with someone, her name was Vicki Bruce, she was my co-writer, and what she enabled me to do was talk to my parents and ask them questions, and she asked them questions too, that I think they answered in a way different than what they would answer to me. I think naturally as a parent, you shield your kids from some of your memories or some of the experiences that you've been through, or you'll talk to a stranger in a different way when you're asked probing questions about why you decided to leave this country, what that experience was like, your fears, everything that you overcame. So that part was interesting because I think, and I would encourage everyone in this room to have those conversations with your parents or even your grandparents if you're lucky enough to still have them with you. And they are small questions. They are, what are some of the things you enjoyed doing when you were a kid? What were some of the books you liked? What were the games you liked? What were your favorite snacks? These are small questions that lead to bigger memories. And you'll see a sense of nostalgia come over your parents or grandparents. And they might go into other things that they remember. And we all have phones. We just hit record. Keep an audio history for yourself, or there are all these services that can help you turn your family story into a beautiful book. You plug in some photos, AI does the rest. It makes an awesome gift. But also it's something to preserve your heritage and your history. Like as Jill was saying, everyone has a journey. Everyone's story deserves to be told and heard. And so that part I really do appreciate about the book writing process, was being able to dig into who they were. And then for me, it was easy. I mean, like if you haven't read the book yet, you'll see they're like 50 plus chapters. They're short chapters, it's like 3-4 pages, kind of just in order. What did I learn? Who was I? Where did I go? How did I get here? At one point I was like, is this book too much like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened? But I took you on this linear journey because I felt like that was the way it would make the most sense to tell the story. I hope it feels like we're having a conversation over coffee, that you're just hearing about how my family got here, who they were, how I became, a journalist at NBC News. But that process was not as complicated as I thought it would be once we got the history and the facts correct. And I will say, my parents, they've never used the word trauma. They don't use the word survivor. They, having passed along to me a very eternal sense of optimism. They are very sunny side up people. And so when they talk about crossing the South China Sea over the course of 2 days and 2 nights and being attacked by Thai pirates who boarded their boat, their fishing boat, they're like, well, thank goodness nobody was thrown overboard, nobody was killed, all they wanted was the gold. They literally look on the bright side of like every scenario. And I think that in setting that example for me, it really helped me in a demanding profession, a competitive profession, and just when you're growing up and you're going through all the normal things that any kid goes through, but then you also have the bicultural challenges of like, okay, not only am I coming of age, but I'm also like Vietnamese American, and my parents are raising me as Vietnamese parents, but I'm kind of a Vietnamese American kid, and all the conflicts and challenges that come with that. You talk about PTSD. I wrote about like, I was with some boy on a park bench, and my mom rolls up and she's like, "Anne, get in the car right now!" And I was like mortified. It was so embarrassing. But their whole attitude was always like, never complain, never explain. And then when it came to sex and drugs, the conversation was just say no. That was it. They were like, the schools will teach you, the libraries will teach you, the other adults in your life will teach you, but we will provide. And that's what they did. That's what I saw them do, is work 7 days a week, never complaining, just kind of like doing whatever it took, right? And they only just had me, and they always say like, you are enough. But I think I absorbed a lot from just their attitude of, why not us? Why not take a chance? What's the worst that can happen? I mean, when you're crossing, the South China Sea, escaping by boat, like a lot of terrible things can happen. But instead of focusing on that, they focused on the upside. And I think that that is a great mentality to have, and that's something that I think carries throughout the book about the various challenges that we all face in our lives, and we get to choose how we react. We don't get to choose the circumstances, but we do get to choose how we react. And it's important to sit in the feelings, but then, what do you do next? And I think my parents taught me what to do next very well.
I love that you speak about optimism, right? I think that's very counterintuitive to the immigrant narrative, right? Which is oftentimes harrowing, challenging with its own struggles. But the thing is, like, people don't cross an ocean into the unknown without absolute eternal optimism. Yeah, and they don't completely reshuffle their lives without belief, some type of blind faith. that things will be better on the other end.
Yeah.
So that really resonates with me. I've always felt that about our first generation, and I remember speaking to an Asian American Studies course, with lots of Vietnamese American children, descendants of immigrants and refugees, and when I said, I admire my parents for their optimism, our refugee community for this optimism, the kids were like, what? Optimism? All I do is get yelled at. So thank you for referencing that. And I just have to ask, I often get this question, because we are oftentimes the only Vietnamese American women in our settings, or the only Asian American women in our settings. We both have been first in different, yours is a much more national stage. I'm just talking about my East Side block. But what drew you to journalism?
So
Very traditional Vietnamese refugee.
Not a traditional course of action for a lot of Asian American kids growing up at the time that we did in the 80s, right? Because our parents came here so we could have a better life. So the options were doctor, lawyer, engineer, maybe business person. That was it. And that wasn't something that was explicitly told to me at all. It just was what I observed around me. So initially when I was young, I wanted to be a heart surgeon. I thought that sounded really cool. And then I thought, okay, maybe being a veterinarian. And I talk about in the book, my parents had a furniture store in Santa Rosa. It was the first Vietnamese-owned furniture store in Santa Rosa. And it was like right across the parking lot from Guardian Pet Hospital. And I used to have to go with my parents all the time. We didn't have a babysitter. I would just have to go there after school. I'd have to spend my summers there because my parents were working every day. So I eventually wandered over to the pet hospital where we took our dog, Callie, and I just asked if I could hang out and watch. I was 11 years old, bored out of my mind at the furniture store, so I thought, maybe I can, see what you're doing. And basically, this veterinarian, Dr. Joy Mueller, made me a little 11-year-old intern. It was amazing. It was back in the day where I think adults were okay, they weren't worried about liability and what are your parents gonna say. I was cleaning tables, then I was eventually drawing up vaccines, then I was giving the shots to the cats and dogs. It was a very hands-on experience. I loved it. But it turns out I'm very allergic to cats, and so I was like, I don't wanna have a dog only practice. So I went into the University of San Francisco as a bio major. I just thought I'll do physical therapy, sports medicine. At the time, those career lists would come out, and you're in high school and you're like, okay, top 20 professions. Oh, physical therapy. You make, X dollars a year. It's stable. It's one of the top growing professions. That seems reasonable. Sophomore year, I'm taking organic chemistry. Very hard. Very, very, very hard. I think I only managed to get an A- in that class because the professor took mercy on me and allowed me to get extra credit for cleaning the lab. Not the assignments, not the tests. I did all of those. I did the other, academic extra credit. I was like, but also is there anything else I can do to help my grade? So at that time, I happened to meet another student at USF named Tuan Lam, Chinese Vietnamese kid, just like me, the male version of me. All of our friends in our mutual groups were like, you should meet Tuan, he's the male version of you. And then they would tell him, you should meet Vicky, she's the female version of you. Turns out they just meant we were very talkative. And so we meet in the cafeteria over pasta, and he's like, oh, I'm an intern at Cron, and I'm interning at KTVU, and all the San Francisco stations. I'm a communication major. I want to be a broadcast journalist, a local TV reporter. And I was just I know what you're talking about. I see those people on TV. I understand, but I never saw the path between me being me and that person doing that job. But meeting Tuan, he made it possible. He laid the little breadcrumb trail and was like, this is how you change your major, this is how you get internships. And I was like, okay, I'm done with OChem, let me switch to communications. Worked for the newspaper at the school, did a bunch of internships, and so I had respect for the field of journalism. At the time, Thuy Vu was a Vietnamese American reporter I think she was at KTVU, and she's been at KPIX, and she's been at ABC7. But I would see her, so I knew that someone from our community was doing it. But it just seemed impossible. I didn't know her personally or how to make that path. But thanks to Tuan and thanks to just taking those steps, I've found myself in journalism. And also I think part of the reason I stayed in journalism was because I didn't really have a plan B. I didn't have, as you'll read in the book, and those of you who've read the book know, right when I came out of school, I got my first job, and right around then, my family, who had like achieved what I considered the American dream, purchased a home in Santa Rosa, like a lovely home in a subdivision. We had like major financial issues, a major downturn. My parents had to sell the home. It was a lot at a time when I was making $26,000 a year with a 4-year college degree, graduated valedictorian. My parents were like, the salary is $26,000 a year? Like, wait, how does that make sense? And my friends were going into consulting jobs making twice that, or maybe, 3 times that amount. And I was like, well, I don't know, this is just how it is, this is what it pays. And so there was a lot of pressure on me, I think, to just make it and succeed, not from them, but just from the circumstances of, well, if I don't keep going, I don't know what I'm gonna fall back on. And in some ways, I think that's what propelled me to where I am. It's just one day at a time, one story at a time, and just do your best and forget the rest. That is like one of my favorite mantras that I learned from my daughters when they were in elementary school. They came home one day and that was one of the things. They were like, yeah, they tell us to do our best and forget the rest. And I was like, there's so much wisdom in that. Because honestly, that's really what life is. My parents are big believers in fate and que sera, sera. Whatever will be, right? So they believe in controlling what you can, your actions, how you show up, how you treat people, how you respond to adversity. And then fate's gonna intervene too. Luck is gonna happen, bad luck is gonna happen, obstacles are going to arise, but control what you can control, which is your own attitude and the product that you put out, whatever that may be, and treating people kindly along the way. And you'll read in the book how I ended up at the network. It was such a twist of fate. It was from a chance encounter with someone that I had met who was working in New York as a local investigative reporter, who I'd been kind to a couple of times at various journalism conferences. I had complimented his team for a presentation they did on stage. And he remembered me from that. And when this job came up, I had no idea that there was a consumer correspondent job open at NBC News. I was at KMTV at my desk. It was right before the Thanksgiving holidays. I was just doing my work and it was very quiet, and I got a series of texts that said, hey, you should apply for this job. And had I never known him, been kind to him, worked with him, he never would have thought to give me that heads up, and I never would be in the job now.
Oh, I love that. That deserves a round of applause, right, folks? So this question kind of coming from a selfish point for me here, but I think this will resonate with a lot of the women, a lot of the members of the audience. You wear your culture very proudly, very visibly, right? And I love your aoyai today. I know we checked in with each other before this. I wish we did not talk about wardrobe.
Yeah, I know. I should have just said, hey.
Yeah. But no, you look amazing. And the thing is that we're both very visible in our Vietnamese American communities as reflections of our community. And it's not fair to place the responsibility of representing the whole culture in any single person, right? But we often find ourselves in those type of situations. How do you process that, often being the first or the only Vietnamese American representation in your spaces, and now on behalf of all Vietnamese people? How do you process that? How do you carry that? And should we carry that? And how do we carry that? Yeah.
Well, I admire you very much, and I have a lot of respect for you for running for office and representing Vietnamese people in public service, because as we are seeing some more folks. Vien's here, Madison Nguyen was here when I was reporting locally, and every time I see a Vietnamese name anywhere publicly, I'm overjoyed with pride. And I'm lucky and happy that my last name is Nguyen, which is the Smith of Vietnamese last names. You see that last name, you know that person's Vietnamese. So that was a big factor in deciding whether or not I was going to uproot my whole family and go from a dream job that I had here at NBC in the area, right? This is home for me. I grew up in Sonoma County mostly. After spending a couple years at Santee Elementary, we moved to Sonoma County, and that's where my family was, my cousins, my husband's family. So it was no small decision to say, should we roll the dice, accept this job at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City, where we never imagined we would live, where it snows, where you can't wear flip-flops year-round. And my parents came as well, because at that time, my youngest daughter was only 2 years old. But a factor, a very serious factor in why I chose to do that, and thank God, like, you know, had the support of my husband and my family, was because of my last name. Because I knew that if I go there, even if I fail and flame out and I get fired after, you know, 6 months, at least let me be there. Let them see my name on the screen. Let other little Vietnamese kids who know that's a Vietnamese last name look up and say, if she can do it, I can do it. There is a sense of duty. There is a sense of responsibility. I don't ever want to say that my story speaks for the whole Vietnamese community. And thankfully, I don't think people expect that. But I do put it on myself to show up whenever I can and to try and platform stories that are undertold. It does weigh on me and my identity. And I have to say it's really weird because in journalism, you're taught first and foremost, you're not the story, stay out of it. That's a very important tenet of journalism, right? Is the story is not about you. But when you show up in a room and you are a woman, you are a mother, you are Vietnamese, whatever it is, wherever we show up, we can't even control the first impression that we make on people because they're gonna have whatever notions they have about us. And that's okay, actually. That's fine. They're gonna think whatever they think, and then it's up to us to get to know people, to ask questions, to be genuinely curious, to lead with, you know, intention when we ask questions, and then from there develop relationships and maybe change the negative perception someone may have about you. But I have to say it was hard to carry the Asian American identity sometimes, because sometimes I just wanted to fit in, especially as a kid. I just wanted to assimilate. I didn't want to have a different sounding name. I didn't want to have food that was different. I didn't want to like have parents who had rules that were different. And then as a journalist, I didn't want to be like, oh, you're the Asian American reporter, so you're going to want to report on only the Asian American issues. Or, hey, this thing happened in the Asian American community, and everyone's looking at you. And the Asian American community is so diverse, right? You have people who have been here many generations. You have multiple nationalities represented. So I just kind of did try to do my best and forget the rest. I knew the responsibility of being who I am and what that means, and to try to uphold it the best that I could, and to admit when I didn't know things. And when we had the pandemic, and we saw a rise in attacks, verbal and physical attacks against Asian Americans because of rhetoric like the Kung flu or the China virus, and just it didn't matter what kind of Asian you were targeted because you brought the virus here. I remember reading stories, watching stories, and seeing people that looked like my parents, like myself, being attacked, and it felt so personal and so raw, and I felt very strongly that I needed to pitch those stories, backed up by the FBI data, backed up by the data that, you know, the nonprofits were collecting. But thankfully, my newsroom responded and said, yes, we absolutely should do those stories. You don't have to be Asian American to recognize that elderly people being attacked in the streets is wrong. And I think at like age 40, I finally felt a little more permission to bring my whole self to work, because it was sort of against how I grew up. My parents didn't lead with identity. I think nowadays a lot of young people are like, here are my pronouns, here is this, here is that. It's a lot when you're first meeting someone. And I don't know that that necessarily serves you well, right? Let people know you as who you are before you throw up a bunch of check marks for people to like abide by. And also my parents were like going into a room and being like, we're Vietnamese American refugees. That wasn't like some big door opener for you. It wasn't gonna get you anywhere, right? So they just led with what they knew, which was working hard, treating people nicely, you know, and just controlling what they could. So I think it's a combination of appreciating who you are, where you come from, your lived experience, what you bring to the table. That diversity is 100% what makes this country great. No question. And I don't know, like, you know, people don't want to call it DEI, they don't want to call it whatever it is. That's fine, you don't have to label it. But recognize the most profitable companies are made up of people from a lot of different places with different cultural values and ideologies. Why? Because any business or company that wants to capture market share needs to capture as many people as they can. And when you have people making decisions in your company that represent those viewpoints, you're going to be more successful. So whether you do it out of, you know, the goodness of your heart or because you're looking at the bottom line, we live in America. We're so lucky we're not homogenous. I think people talk about how, you know, how tough it is right now for immigrants, and I agree. There is an anti-immigrant sentiment that we see and hear about a lot in the news. But I also think there are so many people like my sponsor family and the churches that helped us. There's so much genuine goodness in American communities, coast to coast. I see it because I travel a lot for my job. And all of that is very much alive and well, but it happens on a one-on-one basis. It happens not with like clickbait and rage bait and social media headlines that like design to foment, you know, division. It happens when you just take the time to talk to people. And I think it's very important that we get back to having those conversations and knowing that we can be friends even if we disagree on things. It's very interesting to me now as I strike up conversations across the country with people how quickly it goes to politics. It did not used to be that. It used to be you could know your neighbor or know somebody at your kid's school for years. You would never know how they voted. And now people are very quick to find out, are you red, are you blue, whatever. And then all of a sudden they shut down. And I think that is the biggest challenge for all of us to overcome in our own bias, but also for people to have those conversations in a respectful way and just for us to all understand, like, maybe you believe these things because of where you were born, how you were raised, the church you attend, whatever it may be, you came by it in an honest way. So who's to say that someone born in California is more right or correct than someone who was born in Alabama and how they feel about reproductive rights or gun rights or religious rights. I've lived in Arizona, I've lived in Nevada, I've lived in California, I've lived in Florida and New York now, and I just think I've been lucky to see border issues up close. I've been lucky to see, you know, the reasons why people feel the way they do, and when you actually see the human beings behind the beliefs, it makes it so much easier for us to have those conversations and to coexist respectfully.
That's beautiful. Referenced a lot of challenges and experiences that overcoming with optimism and with hard work, with perseverance. And you spoke about identity just now too. I want to just be more focused on this question. Oh my God, I'm interviewing an interviewer.
So, yeah,
I'm hearing myself talk. Oh my God, this is a big win. Okay, so just want to get the chisme from this world, this really glamorous world of broadcast television. Could you talk about some of the challenges of being a woman of color in this space and how you overcame them, in addition to what you've already shared?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, to your point about like how we bring ourselves to work and we have to figure out how we want to show up for our communities, and we have to recognize that we do represent communities, whether we want to or not. That is going to be assigned to us. Like, oh, you know, Supervisor Betty thinks this, that must be how all Vietnamese women think, you know. Couldn't be further from the truth, but like that's a barrier to overcome. I will say I haven't been too hung up on it, because I know that being a Vietnamese American woman has certainly helped me in professional situations, and I know for a fact it's hurt me as well. Perfect example, first job, I'm at a conference in New York, the Asian American Journalists Association, carrying a bunch of VHS tapes with my resume reel on them. And that's how you have to find a job in this industry. You can't just show them a paper resume. You actually have to show the news director or the hiring manager what you look like, what you sound like when you are in front of a camera. And after I showed my tape to the general manager of Central Florida News 13, he literally said out loud, but to himself, oh yeah, we have a gal, Jane Park, she's leaving. And I'm like, okay, Jane Park, she's Korean. She's a Korean woman. Like, I assume from the name, right? That's a common Korean American last name, or Korean last name. So I'm just thinking, oh, he's thinking an Asian for an Asian. Works for me. Oh. I'm a 21-year-old, I'm trying to get my first job. Whatever you need to make sure that my tape gets to your news director and that I get hired, fine. I for sure know that there have been times where there were already enough Asian Americans at a particular station or in a particular market, where being Asian American did not help me. They were over-indexed. They didn't want to have a newsroom where they just had 12 Asian American women on air. So for me, these are immutable characteristics about me. So I'm not going to dwell on, well, I'm a woman, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. I'm going to get the job that I am meant to get.
I really do believe that. I do believe that there is a degree of hard work that goes into getting anywhere, accomplishing anything, for sure. But there's also so much luck involved. Like Tom Yamas, who is the nightly news anchor now after Lester Holt, stepped down and is now doing Dayline. And Tom talked a lot about that because he reflects on the fact that he's the first Latino American to anchor a weekday national broadcast. That's huge. But he recognizes that there are many other Latino broadcasters who are super talented, super hardworking, good people. But the stars aligned in that moment for him to ascend and take over Lester's chair. And I appreciated that he talked about that because I've always felt that way too. I'm super happy that it worked out the way it did for me. But I don't take full credit for all of it because the person who left before me left at the time he did. I happen to know the people who were in the investigative unit. They happened to be watching some of the reporting I had done here at NBC Bay Area over the years. And when I had the conversation with them in December of 2018, they were like, oh, are you coming to New York anytime soon? Maybe we can meet and talk in person. And I was like, I happen to be coming there next month for the DuPont Awards. I mean, what good luck, because they were cheap. They didn't want to fly me out. So I happened to be going there anyway. And then that turned into like 21 interviews over 2 days, and then 4 months later, I was working at NBC News. So you can't explain that. That's luck. That is, some things just going your way, but you have to be prepared. And so I think about it a lot, that, there are just some things that I'm a Vietnamese American woman. It's helped me, it's hurt me, but I don't dwell on it too much. I just try to lean into whatever advantages that could give me in whatever scenario, and in the times where it's been disadvantageous, I don't worry too much about it.
Yeah. It sounds like you embrace every opportunity before you, and every part of your life, good or bad, and you roll with it. I love that.
Yeah.
Vicki, we have electeds in the audience, we have leaders, community leaders, we have folks who are making moves and waves here. We're always looking for earned media opportunities. So I'm going to ask you, what makes a story pop? What deems a story worthy to be on 6 o'clock news or on the 8 a.m. morning show?
I mean, for me, I have my own show that airs from 12 to 2 Eastern time every day on broadcast from the middle half of the country to the East Coast, and then another scene takes over from 2 to 4 for you all here on the West Coast. But if you watch on streaming, you'll see us. And the stories that I look for, and the stories of people that I try to profile, are people who are doing extraordinary things in service of others. I love to find those stories. Or people who are inspiring other people. Because the news of the day is going to happen. You have to cover the war, you have to cover the shooting, you have to cover the fires and whatever else is happening in the news. But when we have the opportunity to showcase people who are trailblazing or who are bringing something new that's going to disrupt an industry or help provide more access. I'm doing a story about Alpha School on background. Don't share this with any of my competitors. But we were just in Miami on Thursday, and it was a really fascinating, interesting story about how their model of education is to use AI tutors, not chatbots, not ChatGPT, not generative AI, but like learning apps powered by AI to teach kids in 2 hours what a traditional school teaches them in 6 hours. And the idea is to give your child time back so that after they do the reading, writing, arithmetic, etc., now they're planning a TED Talk. Or if they're in kindergarten, they're learning how to set up their own play date. It's to teach financial literacy. It's to show them, how to be self-guided learners. And at first I was very skeptical because I'm the mom of 3 daughters and I hate screens and I hate anything that has to do with just like people kind of brain rotting in front of, a computer or a phone. And I really don't like the overuse of like technology in classrooms. I like paper and pen, and the like rampant cheating that happens because of the ways that students have figured out how to use AI that their teachers haven't caught up to. So for a host of reasons, I was very skeptical about this approach. But in talking to the founders, in talking to the students, in observing myself, and being allowed to roam around the campus and talk to the guides, they don't have teachers, they're guides, it definitely opened my mind. So those are the kinds of stories to me that I look for because they have the potential to change perspectives for a lot of people. We profiled Natalie Nakase before, when she first was named your WNBA Golden State Valkyries coach, and then she just went on to win like Coach of the Year for the WNBA after her first season. So I was super excited. I do look for Asian Americans or people of color who are doing things in spaces where you don't often see them or you've never seen them. So those are the kinds of things. And I think, you know, as electeds, right, like, what is an interesting policy that you're putting forth? You know, like, I am a big believer in transparency and being proactive when it comes to getting the messaging out. And if you're doing something that, you know, is going to change your community for the better, yeah, that's our responsibility to make sure we get that information out. Also to be skeptical, also to hold you accountable if the plan doesn't come through. But I think that, you know, making sure that when you're proposing laws and policies and ordinances in your community, that they're actually going to have results and make things better for the people you serve. Those are all important stories to tell. I used to have a councilman, or was he his name escapes me. He was in Palo Alto, and he would always have he would set up a table maybe every quarter that was, there ought to be a law. Joe Smitty, thank you. I loved that. I thought that was so brilliant. Like, you're reaching out to the community, you're getting ideas from your own constituents, and often, how many times have we all said, no, there ought to be a law, you know? But you all are the ones doing the hard work. Mm-hmm. And so I like those stories. I do. I actually love community politics, because that's what affects people. Local news is so important because that's what affects people where they live.
I love that. There ought to be a law, to my fellow electeds in the room tonight. Maybe we could do a road tour throughout the whole district and county. Vicki, you've talked a lot about, this whole conversation about the importance of storytelling, which you've really beautifully encompassed in this book here. So for those who haven't read it yet, it really does read like a conversation with a girlfriend. It moves, it flows, you go from lighthearted moments to like, oh my God, like really deep moving moments. And I was interviewing upstairs earlier by your colleagues at NBC Bay Area, like, what does this story mean to you? I said, it reads like, not to put too much pressure on you, I'm not doing that, but it reads like a blueprint. It reads like a blueprint for fellow women who are building their path, carving out their own space, and landscapes that don't often have women that look like us. So I just want to thank you for that. So I want to ask, give us the Vicki Nguyen treatment of the importance of storytelling, and especially telling stories of immigrants and refugee communities. Why is that so important to do, period? And is there a higher purpose, even a greater importance now in this current environment?
Absolutely. Well, I will say my jaw did drop when you said it was a blueprint. I have never heard of it described that way, and I really appreciate it, because I do think from salary negotiations to how I dealt with my own little sexual harassment moments, you know, throughout my career, I try to be super transparent and open, and that's just kind of how I am. Like, I don't like small talk. When I meet people, I want to get right to it and like know them, because who knows how long we have on this planet? We have this one life, so like, why don't we try to learn as much as we can while we're here, right? But I will say, to your point about why storytelling is so important, I think starting with your own story is very important. And I've heard a lot more about this lately, and I really subscribe to it. The idea that what we tell ourselves about ourselves is what our brain receives, and it manifests itself. So when you are optimistic and positive and encouraging to yourself, the way that you are to your friends and your loved ones, that is the kind of care and love that you should give yourself. And I think that grows your confidence, and that builds your resilience. And so when you face the inevitable setbacks that we all do, you bounce back that much easier. So yes, I believe in the power of storytelling, and my job allows me to like meet people and find those stories to tell about people who are making a difference in their communities. Whether they're refugees or immigrants or just, you know, educators, inspiring people, I'm grateful that I have the kind of platform that I do, and storytelling happens in lots of ways. I mean, it can happen on social media, it can be an official news story, or a sit-down one-on-one profile, always looking for those inspirational stories. But I do think now more about the storytelling that we do for ourselves and our own lives, and the things that we tell ourselves. And raising 3 daughters now, 16, 13, and 9, I think about that a lot, and how to encourage them not to have false confidence, not to like, you know, pump themselves up if they haven't like sort of put in the work and sort of earned it. But I do think, you know, they do sports, they do academics. I mean, school is harder than ever. So for them to know, and for women who are in demanding professions, who are juggling a lot at home and also working outside the home, whatever your challenge may be, is to be gentle with yourself, to give grace to yourself, to not get sucked in by this culture of comparing and despairing that I see so much now because of the prevalence of social media. Everybody has not gone to Japan, everybody has not run a marathon, everybody isn't just getting married. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, it is, what are you doing? And like, what did you wake up for today? And what can you find gratitude in? And sometimes it's a practice, as they call it, right? It's a daily practice of thinking of I get to's instead of I have to's. I really liked this too. I heard this where it's like, I get to go to work. I get to exercise. I get to cook dinner. Like, it's just a small mind shift from I have to do this, I have to do that. Because I have that refugee mentality. Like, my mom the other day was like, it's so great, we have running water. And I was like, you're right, Mom, it is great. I mean, we've been here 45 years, right? But she still turns on the faucet sometimes and it's like, running water, what a miracle. And she's right, and it's great. And if you can get up and be excited that you have running water, then it's gonna be a great day. It's all uphill or downhill from there. What's the expression? Sometimes my yes, brain is like, we'll go uphill from here. Okay, uphill is good? Yeah. Okay, but you know what I mean? So that's kind of like what I think about storytelling. I think storytelling is extremely powerful, and it starts with the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and what we're capable of.
Yeah, something that the Library Foundation does.
Kính thưa quý vị, vừa rồi là buổi Signature Author Event của 2025 do Quỹ Thư viện Công cộng San Jose tổ chức tại Blanco, là một chương trình ý nghĩa và ấm áp. Lisa cảm ơn quý vị đã theo dõi chương trình phóng sự cộng đồng. Lisa tường trình tại thành phố San Jose, tiểu bang California. Xin kính chào tạm biệt và hẹn tất cả quý vị trong những chương trình phóng sự lần sau.